wage enhancement for that, from the ministry. So if you look at Oceanside Elementary School, we've got 2 responsible adults. They're paid $27.09 currently. That will go up with the labor market increase that's coming soon. So they both work 3 hours per day, 5 days a week. So that's about $32.50 a month. We do provide additional time for clerical. So we provide 2.5 hours a week, which is about 30 minutes a day, required for the registration and the billing and things like that, the attendance summaries. Benefits comes in at around $220 a month. And then operating costs, we put around $200. Now, where we really benefit is that we're using our facilities. We don't pay for utility costs or facility maintenance. It all is under our general operating funds. So total expenses is about $4,500 per month. And as I shared, we zipped up to 23 participants. So we get about $4,600 a month in registration costs. Some of the participants are partially or fully subsidized through the Affordable Childcare Benefit through the MCFD. And just recently, we finally got our CCOF, which is Childcare Operating Fund grant, and that's pulling in about $1,100 per month. These are just really average costs. So I'd very, very caution. Like I said, money comes in, money goes out. Not quite sure where we're at, but that gives an overview of what it costs at Oceanside to run about a cost neutral program.
Great. So it's kind of written in sandstone, but not in granite, is what you're saying.
Sort of, until, you know, and I think part of it is because when the school district, we have Julie who collects checks from the ministry. One of the frustrations that we need to tidy up is it doesn't, when a check comes in, it doesn't actually say what it's for. So it doesn't say it's the Child Care Operating Fund for Oceanside or for Bowser, or sorry, for Arrington. It doesn't say which family it's connected to at which school. So there's a little bit of searching that's gone on. But sitting down with Ryan and Julie recently, we think that we have we're on the pathway to have some better systems so that we do know where we're at. Because one of the worries that I had is I hope we're not losing money here. But I am confident that we're running cost neutral, and most importantly, we're providing a great service to our kids and families.
Okay, thank you, Julie. I'm going to take some questions. Thank you, Sheila. I'm going to take a question from Julie and something from Matt, and then I'm hoping we'll move on, but we'll see how it goes because we'll just see how it goes. Julie.
Thanks, Sheila. So that was sort of a budget for the other school, but Arrington only has 12 students doing the before and after school care. So I'm just wondering what the budget would look like for Arrington, because it's bringing in $2,400-ish.
Yeah, I do have a budget for that. If you give me a few minutes, I can pull it up if you want to skip.
Well, does it end up being cost neutral or?
Yes, and part of that is that we get the subsidy from the ministry for the ECE wage. And yes, we only have 12 students, and we don't have an RA for 3 hours. We have her for 1 hour a day because we only have 12 students. And that gives us the ability to, if there was a 13th student that wanted to come on board, it gives us that ability to have that second person, and also for transitions.
So do you need the budget to come up, Julie, or are you satisfied with that answer?
I think as long as it's sort of still cost neutral. I just wondered because there's such a gap, there's such a difference in the number of students where the savings are being made at Arrington, but I think Sheila addressed that.
Great. Okay, do you have another question or are you good? No. And Matt, did you have something?
Yeah, again, I know the after school care and there's resources, and typically those resources, I'm assuming, but most often include PE equipment. And like all after school programs that use PE equipment, it gets used. I just didn't see in that budget, I'm not sure if the $200 was mainly for snacks and stuff for the month, but I would appreciate that there be some thought about some money going towards resources that are being used, or if there's a set amount, and so it's just not random PE equipment being used at the end of the day, and maybe it's a set piece of equipment or something like that. Just because that equipment is typically stuff that gets used with these types of programs, and not necessarily replaced, right? So at least it comes out of a different area. So I just wanted to raise that forward. Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks for bringing that up, Matt. I always think that's an important issue. We have that with user groups as well. And you know, this year was all about making sure that we had the people in place and the roles and responsibilities identified in the budget. And definitely, if there's some things to be purchased, we also have to think about storage as well. So definitely, we don't want that the wear and tear of equipment, and we can work through that.
and Angel has just noted in the chat that the PAC chair at Oceanside Elementary has spent a lot of money to purchase gym equipment over the years, and we thank the PACs for that and for all that they do. Over to Ron.
Yeah, again, I think Sheila answered it quite well in terms of this is in its infancy. This is it as not a pilot, but again, we're in the early times of it. And so we've kind of said to Sheila, I said, certainly try to make it cost neutral. That's not to say that there won't be some costs that we need to bear on behalf of the program to, again, support clerical, to support admin, support supplies and that kind of stuff embedded into the budget. But again, it is a bit of a working project. We'll do a report out at the end of this year kind of thing that will sort of encapsulate the known costs so that Sheila has some working documents in terms of projecting it for next year. Obviously to include enrollment, to include, now that we know sort of the basis of some of these funding sources, she's got a better handle in terms of the working time as it were at the clerical level, at the school level of their time. And so all of this is obviously going to be reported out so that we sort of get a better understanding. But again, to her point, it is really cost neutral. We don't want to put a burden on the district, but likewise, we don't intend to make a profit out of this either. It really is about providing a service to the families, to the kids in those community schools.
Thank
I
you,
would like-
Ron.
Can I just say one thing? I forgot the most important piece that I wanted to do here is to thank the board for their ongoing support for these initiatives that we're doing, because it really is important to have that backing and support that makes this successful.
Thanks, Sheila, and that's much appreciated. Any more questions or comments or anything before we move on? And I'm aware of the time, but I don't want to come down too heavily on timing. So I'm hoping Phil's usually fairly quick at what he does, and maybe we can catch up a bit. Anything else before we move on? First item then under project updates is the Oceanside Community Track, and I don't have a lot to say except that the society is currently in the process of winding down. There will be a group of activists who want to be organized in a way that's different so that they don't have to do all the things that societies have to do, and they'll be continuing with the fundraising, and that fundraising will eventually go to the track. And Phil, over to you for the next items, and Ron as well.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I don't feel any pressure from having to talk quick, as you primed me there. So update on the track, where we're at with that quickly from an operational level is the existing portables that are there to the west end of the track there. They're being relocated, the staff in there, the DRC library. We're working on some renovations inside past Woodwinds, Winchelsea Place there to renovate some space in there to make room for the library, the DRC to move. That move's happening throughout the summer. We get into September, October, and we start to look at how we can get rid of those portable buildings And that's going to be our main access into the field from Wrens Road to do the track renovation. So that's the first step here in getting everything ready. And then in September, October, we start getting into the planning phase for contractors and phases of the project to start hopefully April next year. Happy to keep moving along if you like there, Elaine. And that's
Any questions or comments from anybody? Nope. Okay, it's over to you guys. People.
So the next item there is the just an operations update, and I had one thing to add on there, Elaine, which I'll touch on at the end. So the BC Hydro Energy Consultant. So for those that are unaware, it was brought up at the last FinOps meeting. BC Hydro reached out with a project that they have. And for $750 per site, we're able to have access to a shared energy manager that a lot of smaller school districts can utilize. So we're sharing someone with 4 other school districts. And what he is currently providing is trying to access any of the grants that are out there with the projects that we already have underway, although it's a little challenging because we got him late in the piece. But anyway, nonetheless, he's working through the projects we've already got lined up for summer to access some of the grants. And equally, he's helping us navigate with a consultant on developing a sustainable energy management plan. And that is starting on July 15th, that is 100% funded by BC Hydro to get that plan enacted. There's a consultancy firm, and it has to be through an approved consultancy firm of BC Hydro. And so SMCN, Steve McNichol Consulting Engineering in Nanaimo is probably going to be doing that work for us. And that's going to really drive where we focus heat pumps in what sites and how we start to allocate capital, and equally start to get the grants from that. So we can start to try and peg what's going to be maximum value and maximum funded. And that's going to drive our decisions moving forward. So he's actually coming on site. I know some of the board were interested in meeting him. He sent me an email Friday. He's over on the island between, I can send you Elaine off topic. He's here last week of June, first week of July, and looking for a date. So anything that works with you guys and works with us and Brant and Mike, we can certainly set that up.
That'd be great. Thanks, Phil. Barry, let's take your question and then we'll go back to Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. That was what I was going to ask you, whether we were going to have a chance to meet with the other Mr. Monroe. So thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, back to you, Phil.
The PRISM report, and so that PRISM report, which kind of dovetails into where we want to get to with the SEMP, the Sustainable Energy Management Plan. But the PRISM reports were conducted before I joined the district, and we've been trying to conclude those and get a lot of the work done. We're 95% or more of the way done, to the point where PRISM, any of the grants that were accessible have all been funded and paid because we're so close to completion. Throughout the summer, we're just working through doing some minor recommended repairs on the HVAC systems throughout the district, and then that will conclude the PRISM report in its entirety. So I would say by September, the PRISM stuff will be completely done from our obligations with that, and then we'll lean on the SEMP plan to drive any of our decisions moving forward after that.
Okay, so we can look for a final report on PRISM at our September meeting.
Yep.
Any questions or comments on that? Nope. Thanks, Phil. We're moving right along. Other updates?
Yeah, the last update that I just wanted to provide, and I shared this at our senior leadership team meeting, and Peter had mentioned that it might be a good one to bring here just to share some of the good initiatives that we've been rolling out here. And so I just want to take this opportunity to quickly, if I can share my screen, work out if this. So tell me if you can see that.
I think it's coming up. Ooh, there's pretty things.
So just a couple of slides here just to show people. So all of our drawings that we've had here in operations and maintenance have been stored in a drawings room That's still sharing, right? Yeah. We had a drawings room, and this is how our trades and our contractors would go when they need to see a drawing of one of our sites, and they'd go in and then spend countless hours looking for the right drawing. And if you can look at that, it's so hard and so inefficient in its current, in what was its current form. So looked out to some other school districts, saw what they were doing. They used a contract company in Ontario, and so we engaged with them. DCM is who it is, and they've used they've done this for so many different large organizations, and so we engaged with them, and that work has concluded. We sent off 2 skids full of our drawings. There was 6,100 and something drawings. Of that, 40% of them were duplicates. There was 2,400 duplicates and 1,200 superseded. So we only needed to access 39% of those drawings in there, and we'd spend all that time going through to work out what was the most current. And so what that led us to was, is my screen still sharing?
Yep.
Does that change if I just put that in there?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the platform that we now have with them. And what we're able to do is actually go in, and so this is the last part of this demonstration, but we can give this access to contractors, and our staff have access to this. We go in and we can click on any of the sites. All our sites are in there. And it's all in the cloud, so they can do it. Actually, instead of coming back to the maintenance ops facility to check out drawings all the time, contractors would actually take these drawings and never return them. And so now we can actually go into these, we can go into, say, Bolinas, and then they go into a couple of different criterias. It's a discipline, mechanical, they can go in. It refines it down to 72 mechanical drawings on the main floor of Bolinas. Go in here, look at our drawings, and do it in real time and do it in the field. And now we don't have to have all those drawings and wasted time. So it's something that we had engaged at the start of this year, and now we have it, and we're able to actually be a lot more efficient in the field. But these are some of the things that are happening behind the scenes that people don't see that we're doing to actually become more efficient in operations. So anyway,
Somebody could call up this on their phone out in the field when they're working, right?
yeah, they can pull it up on the field. We can give contractors access, and they can do it without even having to come here and find the paper copies. So it's a beautiful thing.
That's great. That's
Providing they're getting the right site.
great. Okay.
Yeah.
That wall shouldn't be there.
Okay, I think I've got Sherry with a question.
Hi, thank you, through the chair. Phil, how secure is this information if it's up in the cloud?
How secure is it? I mean, it's as secure as
Donald Trump.
secure as us having it in a PDF form. So they have pretty stringent gatekeeping and that sort of thing on it. And we did some vetting with them when we first engaged with them, and yeah, I mean, it's as secure as most other things are up there. But I mean, it's more secure than us giving our drawings to unknown contractors and never getting them back. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about people hacking into the system, right? Like, of course,
Yeah.
we're not in the United States, but still.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, totally different to student records and those sorts of things, obviously. One of the other things that I didn't add of why this is important to do is that if we have fire or flood here in the maintenance ops location and we lose all our blueprints, we're cooked. So getting all this stuff is a backup as well.
Okay, I have a note from Angel in chat about this is fantastic, worth the cost to have it done, so efficient, environmentally friendly, and I want to echo that.
Pardon the pun.
Now that I'm on the Strata board, I know that how difficult it is to have all of these drawings around that aren't updated. So Brent just said still have the hard copies, right? On skids, right? Okay. And I hope that, that you'll be able to update us a bit on the process of, the busing,
Oh, yes.
situation. Yeah, because I'm getting some parents, letting me know, they're just nervous anyway.
Yeah, and so look, I'll speak very high level, add a couple of points here, and then throw it over to Brant, who's the manager of transportation and safety. And but you know, some of the things that we've been working through, or Brant's been working through with the transportation team, is identifying. So we've got Traversa coming in. That contract's been signed. That's the route software and getting the iPads in the buses with turn-by-turn instructions. And that's going to really start to drive efficiencies within the transportation department. But we're not in a go live state with that till you know, early next year, you know, sort of March, April next year, best case. So all that work's going to start to be undertaken starting in September. In the meantime, we've been trying to actually look at the bus network system as best we can now without that software. And there's lots of agreements that are in place of busing stops and routes and courtesy riders and courtesy out of boundary ridership and all that sort of thing. And so Brant's been working through that right now. And there has been some concerns from parents as they've put in their bus pass application here. You know, and what I would just like to say is all the bus pass applications were typically done in August and September. And it's great that we've actually been able to digitize the application process, bring it forward now where applications were done in May and June. And these are great problems to have now while everyone's still engaged before they go off for the summer, because typically we'd be holding the bag in summer, trying to go through these problems, but not be able to access anyone to actually work through it. So we've moved the process forward by 2 months, but we've also been trying to work out where all these agreements come from. Brant was telling me this morning, we had some bus stops that did a pickup in the morning, but that stop didn't exist in the afternoon, or a stop existed in the afternoon, but it didn't exist in the morning, which made not a lot of sense, you know, whether they're not mirrored and stuff. And so we've been working through that. And Brant, I'll throw it over to you to see if you want to sort of add any more granularity to that.
Sure. Thank you, Phil. So yes, we've been cleaning up what's been inherited. Most of our leadership now in transportation has changed over the last couple of years. So there's definitely some growing pains, all of us learning our roles, and that has contributed to some of the frustration on the parents' part as we all become more familiar with what's been in place historically. That said, we're trying to build efficiencies and reevaluate things. One of the steps that we took this year was to remove a lot of our old courtesy stops that were inherited from 10 years ago that weren't necessarily active, or we didn't know if we're active anymore. And now we're reevaluating as applications are coming in for courtesy ridership. We're reevaluating those and trying to establish stops that are better suited based on current need, not the need 10 years ago. So we're working through that for cross-boundary areas and courtesy ridership for secondary schools, and still unearthing things that have been done historically where there's been precedent set. But all of these different caveats to the rules of just walk limits and cross-boundary haven't been well documented necessarily historically. So we're trying to unearth them through conversation with parents, principals, and vice principals, and we're still learning that so we can see the whole picture. So it'll be a process from now till September, working with those courtesy rider applications and determining our occupancies on our buses.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to both of you. In the chat from Matt, what was the initial cost to go through and upload all the drawings and the cost moving forward?
Yeah, so the drawings, I think it initially, the upfront cost was around 36,000, I think, to get everything digitized. And then from memory, this is loose numbers for ongoing costs, it might be around 3,000 a year to maintain it. And then what happens is every time we do renovations and or new builds or anything gets changed, part of the process now is to actually have in the cost format for the contractors to have that digitized as part of the project costs so that things constantly stay current.
Okay. I saw Julie's hand. I don't know if your question got answered, Julie. I don't want to skip over you.
Well, no, I just wanted to comment on Sherry's question, and I don't know for sure, but I would assume that these drawings would be available for public consumption, whether it's through a freedom of information request, or, these are public dollars that are building these sites. And so I would assume that this is public information anyway. I'm not sure of the mechanism for people to actually get it, but eventually I'm sure they could.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, again, we've had them here in our drawing room. People that need them can access them. It's not something that I would imagine we'd be openly giving to the public. I'm sure if we needed anyone that needs access. So the thing is with this is we have the ability to give people access in a read-only format for those that need it with a time limit, and then it times out and then they can't access it anymore. But it's definitely not something that is secretive. It's just foolproofing our system.
Okay, thank you.
And- No, actually, I'm just gonna jump in there. And
Okay.
truthfully, we've never been FOIP'd on it. I would actually get legal opinion on it from from the security aspects if we're handing out floor plans of our sites kind of thing. Be that as it may, we've never been FOIP'd on it. Yes, they're public facilities, but I would question whether or not they are publicly accessible just by the nature of security and what people could do with a floor plan of our schools.
Thanks, Ron. And FOIP means Freedom of Information Request. So just for clarification, over to Carol.
Brent, my question to you is about the busing, and I did get some calls and concerns from parents and students about the transportation. Were there some routes that were changed? Was there a lot of routes that were changed?
No, there weren't a lot of routes that were changed. The changes are mostly around courtesy stops. We had a lot of inherited courtesy stops, as I mentioned, that weren't even active or were active, but we wanted to try and consolidate them. So what we did was in hindsight, we removed them from our published list. But that means that when parents are trying to apply now, they don't have that option to select anymore. So it's caused some problems for example, for KSS parents that live in the Arrington area. We had removed some stops that affected them. We also removed some stops that affected French Creek families to getting to Bolinas, which is a courtesy, or Whiskey Creek area. So we're working through all that now as the parents have contacted us and let us know, and we're trying to determine what the need is based on how many students where. And then also the only changes we're trying to make this year is to alleviate pressure on buses that are over full. If we were using a calculation of K to 3 sitting 3 to a seat and 4 to 12 sitting 2 to a seat, we have some buses last year based on registered numbers that are at 180% capacity, which is just not sustainable. So that's the only changes we've made this year because we don't have the software really that makes it efficient for us to change those. So we're just trying to plug some holes, alleviate a little bit of pressure, and clean up some old inherited stops. And that said, because I think I want to fall on my sword here a little bit, because I am new in understanding our stops and our regions and cross boundaries, and so is the rest of the team here that is directly involved in building manifests and route sheets. We've learned now in hindsight that there are some we should have worked harder to identify those stops ahead of time before we made the list published. But because we were trying to get it out in April, so that there was lots of time to work through this, there was a really tight time constraint on doing so. So now we're kind of doing it live, which is a little bit more troublesome and I know causes some anxiety for parents. But the good news is it's June and we're working through these problems now instead of October and November like we did last year.
Great.
So Carol, if I could just jump in there quickly and add to what Brant had. So we've some of these parents that have had concerns have either been dropping in here to the maintenance facility, calling and all these sorts of things. And Brant's been working through them. And one of the ladies, the mothers that had concerns, she actually sent a nice email today, Alyssa, and just saying, thank you for alleviating my concerns. And so any of these people that have feeling a little bit stressed under these circumstances have been getting reassured that we're going to work through it together from Brant. So we'll continue to do that, and you can just direct them to our way, and we can help navigate that.
Right,
Thanks.
which I did. I was just wondering though, has staffing played an issue in the routes, or is staffing an issue for us right now for bus drivers?
We're doing okay. We're tight today because of the Port Alberni closure. It has affected a couple of our bus drivers
Right.
with the road closure, but we're going to make it through the end of the year, hopefully without canceling any more routes. And we are hiring and building and onboarding staff still, and we already have at least one bus driver hired to start in September. So things are looking much better for next year. And that hasn't impacted how we're looking at providing busing for next year. In fact, my sincere hope is that we expand our service for our smaller buses and some of our higher needs service. So if anything, we'll increase ridership or service for next year is my hope. And luckily our recruitment has really picked up in the last couple months and with some hard work at trade shows and advertising, and we're in a much better place than we were in January and February.
Oh, thank you very much, both of you.
And Matt has left a comment in the chat, which I'll let people read at their leisure. I hope that's okay, Matt. And Julie.
Yeah, this is just a shout out to everybody that's been involved with that bus driver recruitment. Every time I turn around, I see an ad from the school district looking for bus drivers, whether it's social media or in the paper or bulletin boards, you name it. You got whoever's been on top of that, kudos to them, because it's been out there and it's been everywhere. So I'm glad to hear that there's been a bit of a payoff.
Yeah, even in the coffee news that I do
Yeah.
Sudokus when I'm having coffee, you know,
That's
it's
right. It's been everywhere. So
Surprisingly, the coffee news has yielded the most results. recently.
really? Oh, isn't that interesting? Okay, well, thank you very much, Phil. I know that you're probably going to do a work plan at the regular board meeting, a work plan for the summer. And I know that our staff are always busy as, I don't know, bees or beavers or something during the summer. So we'll look forward to hearing that. And we're going to move on. Ron, do you have anything with operations, or are we good to move ahead and just go on to the WCB?
Absolutely. I think, yeah.
Okay.
Operations is good, Bill, and thank
Okay.
you to Phil and Brant for, sharing with us. Thank you.
And we're over to Brent and Anna for WCB rate increases. And this is
So-
discussion, but it's also kind of information for us to kind of think about.
So if you don't mind, I'll introduce it.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it's been kind of percolating for the last couple of years in terms of our rates and the sector rates kind of thing. So again, what you're seeing in the agenda is kind of where we're at over the last 9-10 years. With some narrative in terms of what the base rate, what the surcharge. So again, just a reminder that the base rate is sectoral. Those are the rates that we can't control. It's based on public school districts and how they are doing against the industry standard in a sense. Surcharge is individual, so that's how we do against the sector. And so that's where we can make a difference. And that's certainly why I've got Brant and Anna here to sort of provide some context of the work that they do to sometimes soften the blows. Sometimes we can't do a lot about it. If there's an accident, we can do preventative, we can do certainly education, and we can do everything we can in terms of making sure that people are safe when they're working. And likewise, after the fact, there's work that goes on that they can share a little bit in terms of the work that the Kelowna SD23 does for us in terms of managing the claims as they go through WorkSafe themselves. But again, so this is really all about recognizing, in my mind, when I was doing the budget, that the sectoral rates increase substantially, and you're kind of seeing the base rate go from 1.12 to 1.34 in 2023, and then likewise, our increase was about 31%, from 13% is the surcharge to 31%. So again, it was really an element of needing to be aware of these costs, because this is one big cost driver that affects our benefit rates. Over to you,
Thanks,
Brant.
Ron. Thanks for introducing that so well. Over to Anna and to Brant for any further comments.
Great. Okay. Well, I'll take over. Anna and I had a great chance to overlap ahead of time, so I'm going to be a little bit of a spokesperson here, and then I'll make sure Anna can speak to anything I've missed. I'm going to do a quick slide share, just real quick, with 6 slides, nothing too extensive. But they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Hope I'm picking the right one here.
Yeah.
Are you all getting my slideshow there? As
It looks
displayed?
good. Yeah.
Great. All right. So as Ron was mentioning there, prefacing a little bit about how the numbers actually work, one of the things I want to point out is that our performance and the way that WorkSafe measures our performance is based on a 3-year window,
Hmm.
and there's always a 1-year lag. So our rates this year in 2023 were based not on 3 years with a 1-year lag behind us. So it takes a long time to see rates impacted by change. And then also our industry rate is also the base, as Ron mentioned, and then we either get a performance surcharge or discount depending on our overall performance against our peers. The different things that contribute to actual claims cost, which is what they measure us on, includes medical expenses, which we don't really have control over, wage replacement benefits. So when a worker is away from work and WorkSafe is replacing their wage, that we have some influence on. And then some miscellaneous things like we had a bus driver who broke their leg stepping out of a bus. During the course of medical treatment, they had to cut off his boots. They were a $200 pair of work boots. And WorkSafe would say we're obligated as the employer to replace those work boots. And typically they would do that on our behalf and then back charge us and add it to our claims cost. Other things as well, if a worker is injured at work and they can't drive, perhaps WorkSafe would say, oh, you're eligible for compensation for use of a taxi, and then that would be added to the claims cost. And we have some ability to pay some of that stuff ourselves as well. Now, one note I'll add is these costs typically, because they contribute to our premiums, we typically pay them back at about 140%. Now that's a rough calculation, but basically they're more expensive to us when they get added to our claims cost than versus direct costs.
Brent, are you thinking that we're going to look at, like, are we looking at slides right now? Because what we've got is your cover slide.
That's what I was hoping, but let me quickly
Oh,
change
okay, that's great.
let me change which one I'm sharing then.
You may have to change it manually.
There we go.
Oh, better. Thank you.
No problem. Now I just got to get back to my little, there we go. So it's moving, it's working.
Yeah, it's good.
Excellent. So as I mentioned, anything that goes into our claims cost, we pay it back through our premiums at approximately 140%. As Ron already mentioned, our industry rate, which is the base, has been on a 3-year trend of increasing. So that's something that's out of our control. But also our poor performance surcharge based upon our standard, our performance, is on a 2-year trend of increase. We do occasionally get things like cost relief, which is where WorkSafe has decided that part of a claim's cost isn't necessarily for us to bear the burden of, and then they will give us relief after the fact, which then causes kind of a grandfathered in back charge where they fix our rates historically. So we've had a couple of those recently, and we have a big one incoming where a specific claim was evaluated and there's over $100,000 worth of claims cost coming our way in cost relief, which will cause our current rate for this year to drop significantly and for the next 2 years. So that's good news. Other things that we're looking at or doing are already in process to try and lower our costs between Anna and myself and Ron even. One is to do more modified work and get people back into a graduated return to work sooner where possible. This would mean that now they're not having lost wages because we're paying their wage to be at work, which will reduce our claims cost. So we can do that by, Ron and I have had some conversations around enabling the creation of a central budget for our payroll so that we can pay the FTE of an injured worker directly, and then they can come back on modified work, even if they still need a full replacement, which is paid for out of the school FTE budget. So that's something that has to go into the budget. That's a year away, that kind of thing. But that's something that Ron and I have had some conversations about, picking a number to use for that budget. And then we would be paying those wages directly as opposed to having them added to the claims cost because the worker's at home and not doing modified work. And then they get paid back at 140%. So basically we're saving that 40% in the long run. Now that's completely dependent on them being medically able to do modified work, and there's a process for that. But there is an opportunity for some savings there for sure. We can do more than what we have been doing historically. Also, we're trying to make our systems more efficient. So that means making sure that staff that need to get medical assessments sooner, whether they're getting prompted to get their doctor's assessment in writing, or just increasing the speed at which schools process reporting. So if an injury happens, making sure the incident is reported efficiently documented, comes to me and to Anna, and we process it faster. So there isn't such a lag from the day a worker gets injured to the day that we're responding as an organization to try and get them back to work. And there's also some opportunities that Anna's been pursuing to potentially pre-book some physio slots so that we can get people into medical assessments, because we all know getting into a doctor is not an easy process these days. And then my only other note that I wanted to speak to specifically is, even if we affect and improve on our own individual performance as an organization, that we won't see a financial benefit from that for at least 2 years because of the 3-year lag in how WorkSafe calculates compensation premiums. So basically, if we were to make 2024 a really good year on our performance and we would have very low claims costs, that wouldn't financially impact us on the budget and our premiums until 2026. The good news is it would then affect us for a 3-year window.
Right.
So again, no change on this front is going to be overnight, but there is an opportunity for change, and it is something that we continually are monitoring our own performance internally on.
Great. Thank you very much, Brent. Anything further from, oh, and I've got something from Sherry. Thanks for sharing. Can we receive a copy of this slideshow upon request? And I assume that that will happen, Brent, because it's in the public domain now. What was I going to say? Oh, Anna, do you have anything further before I go to Barry for a question?
Nope. Brant's done a great job explaining. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, thank you. And over to Barry for your question.
Thanks, Elaine. So Brent, if a CUPE employee, let's just say an employee, it doesn't matter if they're CUPE or MANA, but if, let's say they're injured on their way to work, like, would you use sick days, or does that come under the WCB guidelines? Like
typically the commute is not covered by WorkSafe unless you deviate from your standard commute at the direction of your employer. So let's say say Phil tells me to pick up donuts for a meeting on the way to work. Yeah. Well, now my trip is covered. Whereas if I'm just commuting from home to work, I'm not usually covered.
Okay. And so if an employee, I mean, you're covered by sick days, but if an employee injures themselves at work, then this would be WCB, right? I mean,
that's right.
I remember once where a teacher slipped on stairs because there was ice on them. They fell and shattered their elbow. So that would be WCB rather than their sick days right away.
Yeah, as soon as they step out onto our property, there are liabilities. So, and that's honestly the most dangerous step most people take in the wintertime is that first step out of a warm vehicle. So once they slip and fall in the parking lot, that's WCB.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting example. So taking it to its full extent, Bill, you can't direct him to pick up donuts, but if he wants to pick up donuts, he's allowed to.
That's exactly it, Ron. Thank you. That's good. Okay, anything more, Barry, or was that your question answered?
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I must say, dealing with WCB from the employment work that I did was equally as complicated as this, but I'm going to go over to Ron, and Ron, you're going to take the next 1, 2, 3 items, and then we'll look for recommendations to go to the board and future topics.
Yeah. So major capital, again, this is Phil and I can we'll tag team this anyways, because it'll be work that we're going to be doing in the next 2 weeks. But just a reminder, major capital is anything about over $1.5 million that basically fits into the additions, renovations, seismic, land, as it were, those sorts of large scale major capital projects kind of thing. And so every June now, that's the cycle, we submit to the ministry our major capital requests. And generally speaking, as you can even see in the package that I've included, we don't have a lot of major capital requests generally. I mean, the last school that we built was in and I'm just going by the one that we just handed out, was about 2000, just before 1999, I guess it was. So we've never had a lot of major capital ones. So what's flipped it for us is the seismic work that's been done provincially, of which we've identified several sites that are a priority for the ministry, again, as long as we can get it into the cycle of the seismic budget that the ministry maintains. So effectively what we're doing is rolling forward at this juncture and we're rolling forward the seismic work that was identified 3 years ago, kind of updating it. We will now update it with new values. So Phil's had some recent conversations with Herald Engineering on new budgets. Obviously, these are last year's dollars, and so obviously at the scale that the budgets are escalating, we know that there's going to be some catch up if we put these values in. So we want to be accurate to what we do. Also reflective on this one, because this won't be the document that we actually submit to the ministry. This is really just to show you a summary of the thoughts that are going on. We do this work in MyCaps. You've heard us refer to the ministry's capital projects database. So we will put these in. We will update it with the new values. But you can see on my note or on my summary that that False Bay was supported with last year's submission. So again, we shared with the board that in March, when we did get our 23-24 work to do, that False Bay was supported in principle, as it were, to which we now needed to do some project definition reporting so that they could actually approve it at some later date. But what you're seeing is these are the things that are going through to the ministry. We will update them and refresh them with the new budgets, as it were. Phil, with his conversations with Herald, may change the priority status of some of them, recognizing that it's about the timing of how we do some of these things. And so with those conversations he's had, he'll probably get a better understanding of the work needing to be done, knowing that he wasn't involved in it last year, particularly. He had just gotten here, but at least he's able to add value, if you want, in that submission process. So that's the high level kind of thing. These would be the seismic ones that we would sort of be addressing with updates that could be provided through Phil.
Yeah, and if I can just dovetail onto
Please.
what Ron had said, precisely the fact that the unit prices for seismic upgrade have all been updated currently because of post-COVID prices. I met with Herald Engineering last week, waiting on some information from them this week. And when the sort of seismic risk assessments were done, KSS and BSS were both at a H2 rating, and so they're equally important for the next ones to go in the hopper. And so one of those will be getting put through to be, requested for next year, and recognizing that one's larger than the other for an upgrade. And so we'll work through that over the next 2 weeks. And put one of those through for submission for next year, for PDRs to be done next year. That's it.
Okay, over to Barry, and then I've got a little point of information.
Thanks. So, I was looking at the Lasqueti Island replacement, and that school started off, back in about the 50s as a 2-room school, and then it was renovated in the early 50s to became False Bay School from the Charlie Williams School. And that's when the, it was the mudroom was put in, and the central meeting room, and the teachers moved out of the rear of the school and moved into the teacherages, and the covered play area was built. So it was extensive renovations done then. And, the part of the cost, that $3.9 million, that, one of the things about Lasqueti is that there's no transportation over there for stuff like that unless you're going to get a barge, or, in some ways it may be cheaper to drop things in with a helicopter. I mean, I'm serious. And so, what I'm wondering is, like, what happens to the school while they renovate, not renovations, it says replacement. So what are you going to do? Put in some, some trailers or something for the school to continue? What plans do you have for that?
So, Barry, a couple of things on that, if I may, Ron. One is it's not even approved to be rebuilt yet. So we're in the stage this year to do the PDR report. And I've been working with Herald Engineering, who's done this before, and they've been working with, and they've done other assessments for island schools to be rebuilt. So first of all, we need to actually make the case that the rebuild cost isn't that much more than a seismic upgrade. And so I think it's 75% is the threshold. So we've got to work through that and make sure we refine what our definition report is of what our ask is. And then that goes through at the end of this year, then that will be reviewed as to whether we've got the green light to do a rebuild next year. If we get to that stage next year where we've been given the green light to actually do a rebuild, the thinking, and this isn't locked and loaded, this is just some initial thought at this stage. And again, working with the engineers and a cost consultant on how we might best do this. But the initial thoughts are where the old gymnasium is right now, the new school would be built while the existing school is still there. And then they can relocate into the new school, and then the existing school could be taken down. Some of the things that go into that report are life cycle replacements. The fact that the reverse osmosis water system, the solar panels, some things that need to be replaced anyway, and that adds weight to a rebuild. But we're not at that stage just yet.
Right. So I'm wondering whether, with some of that other stuff like the solar panels and stuff, whether you could get TELUS to be part of that, because it's part of the telephone system too, so there may be some. Yeah, so the cost consultants that we're going to use have done this on multiple island schools before. And when you talk about a barge and things like that, some of these builders that have been awarded contracts, and again, this will all go through a robust tendering process and everything, but there's a contract company that has their own barge and they're barging stuff as part of the cost that it's done. So we're going to really lean on the cost consultants, and they typically come from the ministry that are very well versed in all these sorts of things. And we'll take a lot of guidance from them as we go through the process. Okay, thanks, Phil.
Yeah,
more on that later.
Yeah, right. My update on this is just a little, I was over on Lasqueti at False Bay in, I don't know when, I can't remember when.
It was the
May, it was the spring fling. And like every small island, there are rumors afoot. I heard everything from, I think, we were spending $7 million. It was going here, it was going there. It was going to be 12 grades. So I just want to say that I think it's really important that we involve that community in planning and stuff as we go along, so that some of these rumors can be squelched.
And on that note, actually, sorry, and I don't want to interrupt.
No, that's fine.
That's something more. On that note, I sent, with Peter's blessing, a note to Braden to share with the community, or encouraged him to share with the community some kind of speaking notes in terms of addressing those gossip. Anyways, the rumors kind of thing that are going around. We recognize that we haven't done any public consultation because there's nothing to consult on at this juncture. This is work that the province has said to us, yes, we're supporting it, and now we need to do the next steps in terms of justifying the project itself. So yes, as things, as the project rolls along, there will be lots of public consultation. Then we can kind of start being a little bit more concrete in terms of the plans and what aspects we need to consider. But in the meantime, it's in the work of staff kind of thing to move the project into a form that is actually approved, and then would get into obviously the planning processes. But yes, so Braden did get some speakers notes, as it were, that he was able to share to hopefully
squelch some of the rumors.
Squelched, or hopefully it didn't create more confusion. But point being, it was just some language that he could use to express where we're at in the planning.
It's not Hornby Island, it's more like Stewart Island. So,
I've got a question from Sherry in chat. Is there still a plan for a seismic upgrade at French Creek, which I understand is being closed?
We would likely prioritize that to the last priority, if it's even a priority at this juncture. But yes, it was identified. Again, these numbers or these projects are coming from the ministry document that says these are the facilities that you have, and these are the conditions that they need that need to be addressed through seismic testing. So it came up, as did there was another one that was on here that we did take off. But point being, it will likely be, we might keep it on the list, but we'll put it down at the very bottom. But again, we can have that conversation. Phil and I can have that conversation of, do we just pull it right off?
Great, thank you, Ron. I suspect that we're going to go over time, which is something that I really I always dislike doing, but I ask your forgiveness on this. Ron, over to you for the next item.
This is a bring back. So recognizing that we kind of showed it, and actually I'm going to screen share the agenda that I've got it on. But this was a bring back from our discussions last month. That just, it wasn't dealt with very well in terms of throwing it up there as we talked about the AFG kind of thing. And it probably created more questions, created more questions than it answered. So bringing it back again to us today, I think is helpful in showing you what the explanation is and what was meant by us sharing it last time. So are we sharing? No,
Yep.
not yet. Okay, so yeah, so this is what's included in the package. And so obviously,
Could you make it a bit bigger, Ron?
Okay. I've got it on paper as well, Julie, so it's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
in
have it
it's
on
in your
paper as
document.
well, but for
It's-
people that don't,
Yeah, okay.
it'd be
hang
bigger.
on. Where's my, oh, there it is. Hold on, sorry. Okay, at the top. So this was the chart that was shared. And so it's the chart itself is exactly what was shared last month, but really what it's meant to replicate is the facility condition index of each of our sites. So again, you can see the script that's below. Facility index is the total cost of needed building repairs and renewal divided by the current cost of replacing the building. Also, I've added on to here the district average in total, and likewise the district average when you exclude the closed sites. So the 4 sites that Craig Street Commons, Winchelsea, Qualicum Commons, and now French Creek kind of thing. So when you obviously close down, or when you take those off of the discussion or off the average goes down again. And then just reaching out to the ministry, the provincial average is between 4.5 and 5.5 kind of thing. So that's where you're kind of sitting at about 0.5 is the district, or is the provincial average of most districts in the province. And so you can see that we sit well below that. We recognize that we've only really got one school that is even above, and again, it's a closed site, but Craig Street Commons is above the provincial average. So again, showing you the examples of how the FCI works. False Bay is the one we were talking about earlier. So on the books, and this is through the ministry's database of things to be done in a timely manner. They are recognizing that there's about a $710,000 investment needed on that facility, recognizing that the replacement on the books is 1.5. And again, simple math, 710 divided by 1.5 is about 40.45. In the Springwood case, in the Springwood case, I kind of highlighted that one because it seemed to be higher than normal of schools that were built in that area. But again, I can't argue with where their numbers are coming from. It was reviewed last summer. They're looking at HVAC replacement, roof replacement, flooring that goes with time, of about a $6.2 million spend against a $12.7 million replacement cost. To get that 0.49, Craig Street Commons has similar conditions that need to be addressed, but it's again, it's a function of the cost of the building itself, and so that's why it's effectively a higher rate. And likewise, again, proof is in the pudding that when you address some of those renewal costs, when you invest some money, some capital, some minor, some AFG money into these sites, it will bring that FCI score down. So you can see at Bolinas, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, we've replaced about 70% of the roofing. We've also replaced, and someone can pipe in, but again, I'm just going to throw it out there, 60% of the HVAC units. We've done some dust collections on the site kind of thing over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. As a result, the score comes down. So again, in a different way or a different rendering of that information of FCI against the year built, you would naturally expect that the newer the build, the lower the score. And that's certainly true with Spring Hill. That's certainly true with Family Place. Arrington is not one of our most, well, I guess it is. I can't remember what building that is, but anyways, Arrington being one of our latest builds has the least amount needing to be addressed. And so that's effectively what you're seeing. This is just a heat map in terms of our older schools all the way back to 1912, 1914, have the worst scores. I guess it stands to reason. And then over the course of looking at this, channeling it from top left to bottom right, worst condition, medium condition, good condition kind of thing. So that's kind of it. It gives your eyes a bit of an understanding of the natural case of the older the school, the more the work. But if you invest in the site like we did in Bolinas, we were able to improve the score probably from up here, and it basically came down across that threshold to here when you look at when it was at 0.56. The year didn't change, but obviously the score would have improved down to this area. So that's the narrative. That's what we're trying to present here. And I'll just open it up now.
No, just hang on before you leave the heat map. There's a question from Sherry about where's KSS. Her eagle eyes didn't see it on the heat map.
I didn't label them all.
So
but hang on a sec.
So it's down in that green area somewhere.
But it'd be one of the green, yeah.
It's one of these ones, yeah. Because I think they were, I won't say built around. I think it's one of these ones because it's got a better score, like a lower score. So I think it's probably this one or this one.
It's interesting that anyway, we can talk.
But no,
about this more.
I didn't label them all. I just wanted to go to the extreme ends, as it were, recognizing that these other ones are in the middle. Well, actually,
just scroll. If you just scroll, you can see it's over on the
Yeah.
leftish side here. It's around 0.31.
Okay, so there we go. Yeah,
in there.
yeah.
I'm sure
so,
we'll be returning to this document because I think it's a very interesting.
So I think
document.
it's this one here. That's KSS here.
Mhm.
And then obviously the other elementaries are sort of scattered about here. But you can see, obviously, we went through a building period, and this is why this map looks so good against the province. Is that this is when our middle schools were built. This is when we replaced a couple of our elementaries, and so clearly we were in a period of growth here when we were building these sites. We added Arrington at just at the end of the where are we at the end of the decade kind of thing. And then these two other sites were added thereafter. Again,
Interesting.
conversation, but absolutely,
Yeah.
this is the takeaway. And again, it's really it's a representation of what we knew anyways, in terms of the older sites are needing more work, which is why they were closed in the first place. And then as we've sort of talked about this the last couple of years, emphasizing it this year, these sites are the ones that have the higher capital needs. And with those capital needs come the risk and liabilities that unless we do something about them, they remain a liability on the books, as it were. And so that's why we sort of attached the priority of French Creek, because it was a fairly high liable, high cost, high capital cost, and least, if you want, impact on tenants and that kind of thing. It does affect community. I recognize any of these things are affecting community and public conversations and board conversations. But again, you try to address them as they come up, knowing that you cannot and will not be able to fund them through operating dollars.
Thanks very much, Ron. I think we're going to probably look at this again in the near future, but we'll see how it goes. Julie and then Peter.
Okay, thanks, Ron. I have a comment and then a couple of questions. And my comment is, I don't think that heat map, the way it looks, is not a very accurate depiction. One, it makes it look like Parksville and French Creek are the worst, but in actual fact, you know, some in the green, like Winchelsea Place, has a higher facility needs index. So I think as a representation, as a visual representation, this map does not represent the graph very well. And my other question, one of my questions is, French Creek does not have as high of a facility condition index as, say, Craig Street Commons, and yet we evicted our tenants from French Creek to put them into a building that has a higher facility condition index. So that seems a little odd to me. Also, my other question is, yeah, because the way it's always delivered is that the French Creek site, oh, it's so bad, it's so bad, it's so bad. But when you actually look at it, kind of in the middle of the pack compared with some of even our newer builds. So evicting our tenants, when I see this, it doesn't really make sense to me. And I wonder, my other question has to do with this facility condition index. And for some of our sites that have been closed, even if we talk somewhere down the future about opening, and then we would talk about how much money it would cost to make them student ready again, because they wouldn't be safe for our students in the condition they're in now. And yet somehow they're safe enough to put childcare spaces in. And I know that there's a provincial regulatory things, but I think we need to really think about that. These sites aren't safe for our students, and yet they're safe for our 0 to 5 year olds. It makes very little sense to me. And also some of our some other vulnerable learners that have been moved from French Creek to the Craig Street Commons.
Okay, we got some questions there from Julie. I don't know if anybody wants to answer them. I think we ended the leases. I'm not sure we evicted people. Eviction requires 14 days notice, and I think we gave them more than that, but
I think that's the main.
Yeah. Anybody got any answers for Julie?
I'm next on the speaker list. I'll just insert
Okay.
myself and say that those are some great comments. And I think that as staff, we actually share those curiosities as well. I mean, if you have a building that's not good enough for our kids, why do we put other kids in there? I mean, I've been asking that question myself for a number of years, and not just here either. One of the things we need to delineate here, and I'm sure Phil will speak to this a little bit more clearly than I can, is the difference between the FCI score and all the work that actually needs to be done to bring it up to the level of usability that you would expect for a school in full operation. The FCI really drills down on certain things, not how welcoming it is, or how pleasant it is, or how fresh the paint is, or other kinds of just items that you would expect in a building that's operating. It's really a fundamental cost of the big ticket items, their age, and then the cost of the building. And on that note, and I'll not speak too much about something that is a secondary knowledge for me, but when we see the Springwood one, that's a curious one to me. I mean, sometimes you can see it when you walk around. Oh yeah, this must have a terrible FICA, or this one must have a good FICA. And I see Springwood is quite a new modern building. It's very pleasant and welcoming, but I think it's a good illustration of the difference between how close it is to being usable and the FICA, because it's clearly in operation. It's clearly a positive building. It's much nicer than most of the buildings that existed in most of the places I've worked. But it does require there are some big ticket items coming to end of life, and that's a mathematical reality that we have to deal with. And you can't necessarily see that by looking at it. But I will say this, when I look at these numbers, okay, we need $6 million worth of work. That's possible. I don't really know what that stuff costs. It is expensive, but replacement 12.7 million, we can't get Springwood for 12.7 these days. I would expect that cost to be 3 times as high, twice at least. I mean, so that's interesting to me. Construction costs have spiraled in the last few years. So anyway, there's a couple of pieces, and maybe when Phil's done, I'll have something else to say, but I don't right now.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Stick your hand up again if you want to speak. There's a question too from Matt, and I suspect Phil could answer this in the chat. Will air conditioning be included with the new upgrade to HVAC systems?
Okay, thanks. No, the air conditioning is not included with the upgrade to HVAC systems. It would be great if it was. Obviously, that would increase the cost by quite substantially, but no, it's not. So the facility condition assessments looking at roofing, mechanical, plumbing, structural, lighting, those sorts of things. And whilst Craig Street and French Creek are different, they're also different in their location and what could be used potentially in the future for overflow school capacity and that sort of thing. So that stuff gets weighted into it. But I think the biggest factor with French Creek as being quite a lift from a capital expense is the fact that the building is riddled with asbestos. And so what we encounter every time we try to do any kind of facility upgrade, whether it be HVAC, whether it be anything, when the walls covered in asbestos, when the ceiling's covered in asbestos, we have to spend an exorbitant amount on abatement before we can actually even do the upgrade. And so the FCA score doesn't really pick up the fact that it's even more capital intensive than it looks on the sheet. And so when we do our asbestos inventory every year, French Creek is by far the largest asbestos site that we have. And so that's something that doesn't really get factored in. So just wanted to put that out there. Like the FICO score is a good, it's kind of like PowerPoint to a presentation. You got to have some context and verbiage to the slide deck. The FICO scores are great, but there's got to be context around, around the fact. And French Creek is super expensive to do any kind of maintenance on.
And I do want to say that I think we'll be returning to this discussion from time to time. So, and I'm looking at the time as well. So, Peter.
Yeah, and I really like the FICA piece. I could spend hours talking about it, but I will say the thing that is different than the FICA score, although it will be, there is a relationship there, is how imminently we feel the roof is going to be in jeopardy of failing, and that's a significant factor for us when we start to feel some urgency around doing something with our buildings. And some of our buildings we're concerned that the roof failure is imminent.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Okay, so more discussion on this for sure. We'll see how it goes. And Ron, over to you for the financial summary and then the recommendations to the board. Future topics is going to be in September. It'll be mostly updates to facilities and financial information. Ron's got a bunch of financial information on the plan for September. So over to you, Ron.
Right, and certainly this is just information, as I say, it's in there for information. This is where we're at as of end of May, so it's looking very good, as it were. I'm not in a panic like I was this time last year when it came to the escalating costs and the control of the costs. So I guess the takeaway to any of this is that likely we're going to settle out with a small surplus at the end of this year. I know I'm not showing June on here or a projection, but we will likely settle out with a small surplus this year, which in the big scheme of things is a healthy way to end, recognizing what we had to sort of dig ourselves out of last year. Remembering that not only did we have escalating costs for replacements and for utilities and for supply costs, but we also had some funding from some of our programs as the kids shifted from DL to regular programming, and that kind of stuff. So again, I'm comfortable where we're at. I'm expecting a small surplus at the end of this year. It will allow us to give back to our operating surplus in reserve kind of thing. As well as we've been able to pay this year some of the items that were sitting there that are sitting as operating appropriated surplus kind of thing. So knowing that we've spent the rest of our energy program down by replacing the rest of the batteries for False Bay, as well as some obviously capital work that we've been able to do, or that we've done on the tenant or the commercial sites, it will come out of our capital appropriated surplus. So those items, even though they're embedded in this cost structure, will come from a different, if you want, a different surplus. So the net gain will be to the bottom line that will actually be able to pay back some of the surplus that we had to use last year and the year before. That's the real takeaway here. More on that. Basically, we'll share something with the board in beginning of July kind of thing, as we get the financials, as we finish the year, obviously watch how some of the last minute expenditures are coming in. We'll end up reporting to the board at the end of August in an in-camera meeting, and then that'll set the tone for the financial statements that get delivered in September.
Right, and we'll have audited statements early in the school year, so we'll know for sure where we're sitting. And thank you, Ron, for that. Any comments from anybody? We're good to go. Any recommendations coming forward? I didn't make note of any, Ron, so I'm not thinking there's anything.
No, when it comes to the major capital, that'll be a recommending. There will be a major capital not recommendation, but there will be a motion on the table or on the floor for support for the major capital submission. So that'll come to the regular board meeting. It'll look.
It's going to look different, though.
It'll look, in terms of the actual report that we print out, will look different, but it'll have these projects, plus or minus, as well as updating with the values for them. That'll form the basis of like I said, the motion that you'll see in your regular board meeting package.
So this being just a draft, we're not going to move this forward.
Well, no, we're not moving this one
By
forward.
recommendation.
Yeah, this is really just meant to let you know where we're at in the cycle, that these are the ones that we're observing that we'll be taking forward, but they will come with different priorities and different values.
Great. Okay, and I think I just kind of laid out what we've got on our plan for September is mostly finance. It's what I've got is minor capital submissions, audited financial statements, financial statement discussion and analysis, and multi-year financial plan. I'm looking forward to that one.
Me too, Ryan.
Poor Ryan. Anything else before we go? Okay, I will thank you very much for everybody being here, and we'll see most of you at 1 o'clock for policy, and have a good lunch. Bye now.